Oberleutnant Johannes Steinhoff banked his Messerschmitt Bf-109 hard left, scanning the crystalline North African sky 28,000 feet above Bizerte. December 26, 1943. Below, smoke still rose from the harbour where American Boeing B-17 flying fortresses had just dropped their payload, destroying fuel barrels and damaging cargo ships. Standard procedure called for pursuit. Standard doctrine promised success. The Messerschmitt could outmaneuver anything the Americans flew. Then Steinhoff saw them. 8 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings, twin-boom silhouettes, unlike anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. Breaking formation to engage, he pushed his throttle forward, building speed for the attack. His wingmen followed, 3 of Germany's finest pilots diving toward what intelligence had assured them were clumsy, vulnerable targets. The Americans called them lightnings. German ground crews, watching them strafe convoys, had begun calling them something else: fork-tailed devils. Steinhoff opened fire at 400 yards. His rounds walked toward the nearest lightning. Then the American accelerated, not a gradual increase, a surge of speed that seemed to violate every principle Steinhoff had learned about fighter performance. The lightning simply pulled away, climbing at an angle the Messerschmitt couldn't match. Steinhoff's speed indicator showed 370 miles per hour, maximum cruise for his Bf-109. The lightning was leaving him behind. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 2 lightnings had been shot down. 3 Messerschmitts would never return to base, but more disturbing than the losses was what Steinhoff and his surviving pilots reported during debriefing. The American aircraft, powered by 2 engines instead of 1, was faster in level flight than anything the Luftwaffe possessed. The twin-engine configuration, which German engineering doctrine insisted would create excessive drag and weight, somehow produced superior performance. Everything German pilots had been taught about fighter design was wrong. This moment in late 1943 marked the beginning of a fundamental reassessment within the Luftwaffe. For 2 years, German fighter pilots had dominated European skies, with aircraft optimized for agility and climb rate. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, the most produced fighter in history, could outturn nearly anything it encountered. The Focke-Wulf 4-190 brought devastating firepower and robust construction. Maximum maneuverability. The Americans had built something entirely different. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning mounted 2 Allison V-17-10 engines, each producing over 1,000 horsepower, connected to a central nacelle via twin booms. The configuration looked ungainly, almost absurd, more suited to a cargo transport than a fighter. Yet this supposedly inefficient design was outrunning, outclimbing, and systematically defeating German pilots who had been assured of their tactical superiority. The story of how the lightning shocked Luftwaffe aces begins not with combat, but with a misunderstanding so fundamental that it would cost Germany hundreds of pilots. Specifically, how to achieve it. Clarence Kelly, Johnson's design team at Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, had received an impossible requirement in 1937. The United States Army Air Corps wanted an interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. Maximum full throttle endurance of 1 hour at that altitude. Rate of climb to 20,000 feet in 6 minutes. No contemporary single-engine fighter could meet these specifications. The available engines, primarily the liquid-cooled Allison F-17-10, produced insufficient power. Johnson's solution was radical. 2 engines, not side by side like a bomber, but separated, mounted in booms extending from the wings. The pilot would sit in a central nacelle between the booms, with armament concentrated in the nose, 4 50-caliber Browning machine guns and one 20mm Hispano cannon, all firing forward in a tightly grouped pattern, no synchronization required. No convergence issues, pure concentrated firepower. The prototype XP-38 first flew on January 27, 1939, with Lieutenant Benjamin Kelsey at the controls. During initial testing, the aircraft achieved 414 miles per hour in level flight, 60 miles per hour faster than any existing American fighter. The twin turbosupercharged engines maintained power at altitudes, where other fighters gasped for air. The counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque, making the aircraft stable and predictable at high speed. German intelligence officers, analyzing photographs and reports from early Lightning encounters, dismissed the design as a developmental dead end. Their assessment, filed in 1942 and preserved in Luftwaffe archives, concluded that the twin-engine configuration represented American industrial excess rather than sound engineering. The analysis emphasized several supposed flaws. The Lightning's wide wingspan of 52 feet would limit maneuverability. The tricycle landing gear indicated bomber heritage rather than fighter capability. The separation of engines from fuselage created unnecessary drag. Most critically, the weight of 2 engines plus associated systems would produce sluggish performance compared to sleek German single-engine designs. This assessment reached operational units as tactical guidance. Luftwaffe pilots preparing to face P-38s in North Africa during late 1942 received briefings emphasizing the Lightning's perceived weaknesses. Attack from above, using the Messerschmitt's superior climb rate. Engage in turning combat, exploiting the Bf-109's legendary agility. Press attacks close, because the Lightning's size made it an easy target. Above all, don't fear the twin engines. They represented weight, not strength. Lieutenant Colonel Werner Junk, commanding Jagdgeschwader 27 in North Africa, incorporated this intelligence into his squadron's tactical doctrine. When P-38s of the 1st and 14th Fighter Groups began arriving in Algeria in November 1942, Junk's pilots approached engagements with confidence. They had defeated RAF Spitfires, aircraft with far better performance reputations than this American hybrid. The Lightnings would be easy meat. The first major engagement occurred on November 22, 1942, 26 P-38. FAS from the 82nd Fighter Group encountered elements of Jagdgeschwader 53 over Tunisia. The American pilots, most with fewer than 100 hours in the Lightning, flew tight defensive formations designed to provide mutual fire support. German pilots, seeing the clustered Americans, attacked from above, diving through the formation in classic slash and dive tactics that had worked brilliantly against British fighters. Then physics intervened. The Lightnings, instead of turning defensively as expected, accelerated. The twin Allison engines, each turbo-supercharged for high-altitude performance, delivered over 2,000 combined horsepower. In level flight at 20,000 feet, the P-38 could reach 400 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt Bf-109F, the variant flown by most German pilots in North Africa, maxed at 390 mph at the same altitude. The Americans weren't faster by a small margin. They were faster by enough to control every engagement. If a Lightning pilot wanted to fight, he turned into the attack. If he wanted to escape, he simply pointed the nose forward and accelerated away. The Messerschmitt pilot, throttle already at maximum, could only watch his target disappear. Oberfeldwebel Herbert Rollwage, flying with Jagdgeschwader 53, encountered this reality during a bomber escort interception in late December 1942. Rollwage, already an experienced pilot with 34 confirmed victories, spotted a P-38 separated from its formation, apparently damaged, flying slow and vulnerable. He'd over to attack from the classic 6 o'clock position, building speed, preparing to fire a decisive burst into the Americans' engines. At 200 yards, the Lightning accelerated, not gradually, instantly. The American pilot pushed his throttles forward, and those twin engines responded with immediate power. Rollwage BF-109, already at maximum speed in the dive, couldn't match the acceleration. The Lightning pulled away, climbing at a rate that seemed impossible for such a large aircraft. Rollwage leveled off, confused and frustrated. He had possessed perfect position, perfect angle of attack, the textbook setup. The American had simply outrun him. The engagement reports filed by German pilots throughout December 1942 and January 1943 revealed a pattern. Attacks that should have succeeded failed because American pilots could escape, turning combat that should have favored the more agile. Messerschmitt became dangerous because the Lightning could break off whenever its pilot chose. The fundamental assumption underlying Luftwaffe fighter tactics that German aircraft possessed superior performance no longer held true. Kurt Bühligen, commanding the 4th Staffel of WWII II in Tunisia, achieved the rank of ace during this period with 20 confirmed victories. On December 26, 1942, he encountered Boeing B-17 bombers, escorted by 8 P-38 Lightnings attacking Bizerte Harbour. Bühligen led his Schwarm 4 aircraft flight in a coordinated attack designed to separate the escorts from the bombers. The Lightnings didn't scatter. Instead, they maintained formation, using their speed to position themselves between the German fighters and the bombers. When Bühligen's element attempted to dive through the escort screen, the American pilot simply accelerated to block the attack vector. Bühligen managed to shoot down 2 Lightnings during the extended engagement, but the bombers completed their mission unmolested. His after-action report noted with frustration that the P-38 pilots controlled the tactical situation through superior speed, despite flying an aircraft that looked like 2 fighters welded together by accident. Franz Stiegler, serving with WWII 27, provided perhaps the most detailed German assessment of the farser Lightning's capabilities. Stiegler, who would later achieve fame for sparing a damaged B-17, flew against P-38s throughout the North African campaign. In post-war interviews, he described the Lightning as fundamentally different from any other Allied fighter. The P-40 could be caught in a turn, Stiegler explained. The Spitfire could be outclimbed above 20,000 feet. The P-38 could do everything. It could turn inside us with ease. It could climb almost instantaneously. It could go from level flight to vertical like a rocket. One cardinal rule we never forgot was to avoid fighting the P-38 head-on. That was suicide. The head-on attack prohibition reflected the Lightning's most devastating advantage. German fighters mounted their weapons in the wings, requiring careful convergence adjustment and limiting effective range. The Lightning concentrated all its armament in the nose: 4 50-caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, firing parallel streams of bullets that remained lethal at ranges exceeding 800 yards. A Bf-109 approaching head-on had to close to 400 yards before its wing guns became effective. The Lightning pilot could open fire at twice that distance, with all weapons converging on the target. Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille, the Star of Africa, with over 150 victories, never flew against P-38s. He was killed in a flying accident in September 1942, weeks before the Lightning arrived in force in North Africa. But his squadron mates who did encounter the American fighter reported that Marseille's preferred tactics, close-range deflection shooting, exploiting the Bf-109's agility, would have been suicidal against Lightnings. The American aircraft could simply maintain distance, using speed to dictate engagement range, then close rapidly when the tactical situation favored it. By February 1943, Luftwaffe Command recognized that previous intelligence assessments had been catastrophically wrong. The P-38 Lightning was not a transitional design. It was not an easy target. It was the fastest operational fighter in North Africa, and its performance only improved at higher altitudes, where German fighters began losing power. Major General Bruno Loetzer, commanding 2nd Air Corps in the Mediterranean, issued revised tactical guidance in late February. German pilots were instructed to avoid prolonged combat with P-38s unless possessing significant altitude advantage. Attack from above remained viable, but pilots must achieve kills on the first pass. Extended turning combat was forbidden. The Lightning could sustain tighter turns than expected, and its pilot could break off whenever threatened by simply advancing throttles and accelerating away. The guidance represented an admission that shocked the entire Luftwaffe. German fighter pilots, the men who had swept Allied aircraft from the skies over France, Britain, and the Soviet Union, were being told to avoid combat with an American fighter. The psychological impact was profound. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Johannes Steinhoff, by 1943 commanding Jagdgeschwader 77 in Sicily, provided perhaps the most significant German assessment. In multiple post-war interviews, Steinhoff, who would survive the war with 176 victories, described the P-38 as the most dangerous Allied fighter he encountered during the Mediterranean campaign. More dangerous than the Spitfire, which was faster at low altitude, more dangerous than the P-40, which was rugged and well-armed. The Lightning combined speed, firepower, climb rate, and operational flexibility in ways that German doctrine couldn't counter. Our Bf-109s were perhaps a little faster at some altitudes, Steinhoff recalled. But a dogfight with the twin-engine fighter was daunting. Its turning radius was much smaller than we expected. It could quickly get on our tail. The American pilots learned to exploit their advantages. They would climb away from us, position themselves above, then dive to attack. We couldn't follow them in the climb. We couldn't escape them in the dive. They controlled every engagement. The technical reality underlying German frustration was straightforward. The P-38's twin turbosupercharged engines produced maximum power at altitudes above 25,000 feet. The Bf-109F and early G variants used in North Africa relied on mechanically driven superchargers that became less effective above 20,000 feet. At 30,000 feet, where American bomber formations operated, the Lightning enjoyed a performance advantage exceeding 60 miles per hour in level flight. More critically, the Lightning's power-to-weight ratio, at combat weight, approximately 0.16 horsepower per pound, matched or exceeded the Bf-109's. The twin-engine configuration, which German engineers had dismissed as inefficient, actually provided redundancy that allowed aggressive tactics. A Messerschmitt pilot whose single engine was damaged faced an immediate forced landing. A Lightning pilot could lose an entire engine and still fly home at reduced speed, one engine providing enough power to maintain altitude and return to base. German pilots discovered this redundancy repeatedly during early 1943. Attacks that damaged one Lightning engine didn't bring the aircraft down. The American pilot would simply feather the damaged propeller, increase power on the remaining engine, and continue flying. Oberleutnant Franz Schiess, eventually credited as the leading Lightning killer in the Luftwaffe, with 17 destroyed, noted that achieving kills required destroying both engines or the pilot. Anything less, and the Lightning usually escaped. The psychological dimension of this capability cannot be overstated. German fighter pilots had learned through brutal experience on the Eastern Front that achieving aerial victories required hitting the target hard enough to cause immediate catastrophic failure. A damaged aircraft that could limp home was a failed attack. Against the Lightning, even solid hits often proved insufficient. The aircraft's twin engines, separated by 10 feet of reinforced structure, meant that ammunition had to be distributed across the target to ensure destruction. Close-range bursts remained effective, but the Lightning's speed made close-range attacks dangerously difficult. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The spring of 1943 brought expanded P-38 operations throughout the Mediterranean theatre. The 1st, 14th, and 82nd Fighter Groups, now fully equipped and experienced, flew increasingly aggressive missions against Axis positions. Ground attack, bomber escort, fighter sweeps. The Lightning proved adaptable to every role. German pilots found themselves facing an opponent that appeared everywhere, striking targets previously considered safe from fighter attack. The Lightning's combat radius with external drop tanks exceeded 1,100 miles. This meant American pilots could penetrate deep into Axis territory, attack, and return to base with fuel remaining. The Bf-109, by comparison, had an effective combat radius of approximately 400 miles. German fighters defending Tunisia, Sicily, and southern Italy operated under constant threat of Lightning attacks on their own airfields, maintenance facilities, and supply lines. Hauptmann Hans Arnold Stahlschmidt, serving with Jagdgeschwader 27, experienced this strategic flexibility firsthand in April 1943. Stahlschmidt, already credited with 59 victories, was leading a dawn patrol from his base at Sfax when 12 P-38s appeared at low altitude, strafing parked aircraft and fuel trucks. The Lightnings had flown nearly 400 miles from their Algerian bases, timed their arrival to catch German fighters on the ground during crew changeover, and executed their attack before defenders could respond effectively. Stahlschmidt managed to get airborne during the attack, pursuing one Lightning as it departed the target area. He closed to firing range, opened fire with his 20mm cannons, observed strikes on the Americans' right engine. The Lightning didn't fall. The pilot feathered the damaged engine, maintained altitude on the remaining power plant, and accelerated away faster than Stahlschmidt could follow. The German ace returned to base having expended his ammunition without achieving a kill. 7 German aircraft burned on the ground. 0 Lightnings had been destroyed. This pattern repeated throughout the Mediterranean theatre during spring and summer 1943. Lightning formations would appear without warning, strike hard, and disappear before German fighters could mount effective responses. The aircraft's speed made pursuit futile, its range made prediction impossible. Its twin-engine reliability meant that damaged aircraft often returned home despite battle damage that would have doomed single-engine fighters. On April 5, 1943, 26 P-38 from the 82nd Fighter Group claimed 31 enemy aircraft destroyed in a single engagement over Tunisia. German records confirm approximately 23 losses that day, primarily Junkers Ju-52 transports and Messerschmitt Bf-109 escorts. The Lightnings lost 6 aircraft, but the exchange ratio roughly 4-1 demonstrated growing American tactical proficiency. More significantly, the engagement revealed how Lightning pilots had learned to exploit their aircraft's strengths. Rather than engaging in traditional dogfighting, where German pilot experience and Bf-109 agility might provide advantage, American pilots used speed and altitude to control engagements. They would climb above German formations, dive to attack at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, fire concentrated bursts from their nose-mounted weapons, then climb away before German pilots could respond. The tactic, later refined and called boom and zoom, negated German advantages while exploiting Lightning capabilities. German tactical responses proved inadequate. Attempts to position fighters at higher altitudes failed because the Lightning could climb faster, above 20,000 feet. Efforts to ambush Lightning formations during return flights failed because the aircraft's range allowed flexible routing that made interception difficult. Even when German pilots achieved favorable positioning, the Lightning's acceleration allowed American pilots to escape if they chose not to fight. Oberst Edward Neumann, commanding Jagdgeschwader 27, submitted detailed reports to Luftwaffe High Command during May 1943, requesting either newer aircraft or revised tactical doctrine. His pilots, Neumann explained, faced an opponent that controlled every aspect of aerial combat through superior performance. The Bf-109, which had dominated European skies since 1940, was now outmatched by an American design that violated every principle of German fighter engineering. The fundamental German mistake had been assuming that twin engines meant disadvantage. In traditional fighter design, Minimizing weight produced maximum maneuverability. Single-engine fighters could turn tighter, roll faster, and change direction more quickly than heavier twin-engine aircraft. Against Polish, French, and early British fighters. It failed against the Lightning because American designers had prioritized different capabilities. Kelly Johnson's team understood that raw speed and climb rate mattered more than turn radius in modern air combat. Fighters operating at 30,000 feet, escorting bombers deep into enemy territory, needed range, altitude performance, and the ability to dictate engagement terms. The Lightning achieved all three through its twin-engine design. Yes, it weighed more than a Bf-109. Yes, it had a wider wingspan, but those disadvantages delivered strategic capabilities that German single-engine designs couldn't match. The twin Allison engines, each equipped with turbosuperchargers, maintained power at altitudes where Messerschmitt engines gasped. At 25,000 feet, each Allison produced 1,150 horsepower. The Bf-109F's Daimler-Benz engine produced approximately 1,000 horsepower at the same altitude. The Lightning's total output exceeded the Messerschmitt's by over 100%, compensating entirely for the additional weight. Moreover, the Lightning's aerodynamics proved more efficient than German intelligence had predicted. The twin-boom configuration, while unconventional, actually reduced the drag by eliminating the need for heavy fuselage structure between engine and tail. The central nacelle, streamlined and compact, produced minimal frontal area. The result was an aircraft that could cruise at 360 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, while consuming less fuel per mile than expected. German test pilots, examining captured P-38s at the Rechlin evaluation facility, confirmed these performance characteristics in late 1943. Their reports, preserved in federal archives, expressed grudging admiration for American engineering solutions. The Lightning represented a different philosophy, emphasizing systematic design optimization over minimalist weight reduction. Every component served multiple purposes. The engine booms housed landing gear, provided structural support, contained cooling systems, and increased directional stability. The central nacelle concentrated firepower, protected the pilot, and reduced drag. Nothing was wasted, but nothing was simplified beyond functional necessity. This American approach contrasted sharply with German design philosophy. Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf engineers obsessed over eliminating unnecessary weight, streamlining every component, maximizing agility. The result was fighters of extraordinary performance within specific parameters. But those parameters, low-altitude combat, short-range missions, favorable logistics, no longer matched operational reality by 1943. The air war had changed. Bombers struck targets hundreds of miles from their bases. Escort fighters needed range to accompany them. Combat occurred at extreme altitudes where engine performance determined survival. The Lightning had been designed for this emerging reality. Franz Stigler's assessment, given in a 1957 interview, captured this fundamental shift. "We flew graceful aircraft designed for dogfighting," Stigler explained. "The Americans flew long-range escorts designed for strategic warfare. In head-to-head combat between equal pilots, our Messerschmitts might have advantage, but the Americans didn't fight on our terms. They flew higher, faster, further than we could match. They chose when to engage, when to break off. We could only react." The psychological impact on Luftwaffe morale proved as significant as tactical defeats. German fighter pilots had entered the war, believing in their innate superiority, better aircraft, better training, better tactics. The Eastern Front had reinforced this confidence, despite staggering losses. Soviet fighters were numerous but generally inferior in performance. British Spitfires demanded respect but remained vulnerable to skilled German pilots using proper tactics. The Lightning shattered these assumptions. Here was an American aircraft built by a nation. Germans dismissed as industrially proficient but aerodynamically naive that outperformed German designs in most meaningful categories. The twin-engine configuration, which German engineering doctrine insisted was inferior for fighters, delivered superior results. American pilots, many with fewer combat hours than their German opponents, controlled engagements through aircraft performance rather than experience. Lieutenant Herbert Kaiser, flying with WWII 27, shot down his first P-38 in January 1943. He would eventually achieve 68 confirmed victories, but that first lightning kill required expenditure of all his ammunition and a pursuit lasting over 20 minutes. Kaiser's after-action report described an aircraft that refused to behave according to German tactical predictions. "It should have been easy," Kaiser wrote. "Large target, twin engines, straight-line flight." But it simply accelerated away every time. Only when the pilot made an error, attempted to climb too steeply, and lost airspeed could I close enough to strike effectively. This requirement that American pilots make mistakes represented a fundamental reversal of tactical expectations. German doctrine had always emphasized exploiting enemy errors while minimizing one's own. Against the lightning, German pilots found themselves requiring American mistakes to achieve victories. Their own tactical excellence proved insufficient against an aircraft that could dictate engagement terms through superior performance. The summer of 1943 brought the Allied invasion of Sicily. Operation Husky, launched July 9th, involved over 160,000 troops supported by massive air power. P-38 groups flew thousands of sorties, maintaining air superiority over the invasion beaches, striking Axis positions inland, escorting bombers attacking Italian and German bases. Luftwaffe resistance proved fierce but ultimately futile. The lightnings were simply everywhere, too fast to intercept effectively, too well armed to engage without risk. Kurt Bühligen, by now commanding the 2nd Gruppe of WWII II, found himself defending Sicily against overwhelming air assault. His pilots, among Germany's finest, achieved respectably kill ratios, roughly 2 Allied aircraft destroyed for every German loss. But the numbers were irrelevant. The Allies had aircraft to spare. Germany did not. Every Bf 109 lost represented a pilot difficult to replace, an aircraft that strained production capacity already stretched thin. Bühligen personally shot down 13 P-38s during the North African and Sicilian campaigns, making him one of the more successful lightning killers. His tactics emphasized patient stalking, waiting for American pilots to make errors, then executing quick attacks from optimal positions. The key, Bühligen explained in post-war interviews, was never to pursue. If the lightning wanted to fight, you could fight. If it wanted to run, you let it go. Pursuit was suicide. They were simply faster. This admission that German pilots must let enemies escape rather than pursue represented a profound psychological defeat. The Luftwaffe's entire tactical heritage emphasized aggressive pursuit of fleeing enemies. German asses had built their scores by ruthlessly hunting damaged or disorganized opponents. Against the lightning, this aggressive pursuit became impossible. An escaping P-38 was gone. Pursuit burned fuel, exposed the German pilot to ambush by other lightnings, and rarely resulted in kills. By August 1943, Luftwaffe fighter strength in the Mediterranean had declined to critical levels. Combat losses, mechanical attrition, and pilot casualties exceeded replacement rates. The remaining pilots, exhausted by continuous combat and demoralized by fighting an opponent they couldn't match, flew increasingly defensive missions. The strategic initiative had shifted entirely to the Allies. On August 25, 1943, 140 P-38s hammered the Foggia airfield complex in southern Italy. The raid destroyed hangars, rail yards, maintenance facilities, and grounded aircraft. German fighters attempted to intercept, but arrived too late to prevent the attack. The Lightnings, having completed their mission, formed up and departed at high speed. German pilots, low on fuel from climbing to intercept, could only watch them leave. The September 8th Italian armistice effectively ended Axis control of the Mediterranean. German forces retreated northward up the Italian peninsula, abandoning bases that had supported operations for 2 years. Lightning groups followed, establishing bases in southern Italy, extending their reach to targets in Austria, Romania, and southern Germany. The aircraft that German intelligence had dismissed as a developmental curiosity in 1942 now ranged across southern Europe, striking with impunity. The final major engagement between P-38s and Luftwaffe fighters in the Mediterranean occurred on September 2, 1943. 10 Lightnings from an escort mission encountered 4 Bf-109s of Jagdgeschwader 53, including that of Franz Schiess, the leading Lightning killer with 17 confirmed destructions. The engagement lasted 8 minutes. 4 Lightnings were shot down. 3 Bf-109s, including Schiess's aircraft, were destroyed. The remaining Lightning, damaged but flyable, returned to base. The exchange ratio for American losses for 3 German might seem favorable to Germany. But Franz Schiess was dead. His experience, his tactical knowledge, his leadership irreplaceable. The American pilots who died that day would be replaced within weeks by fresh graduates from training schools in the United States. The strategic mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. Johannes Steinhoff, reflecting on the Mediterranean campaign in his post-war memoir, wrote, "We lost the air war not because our pilots lacked skill or courage. We lost because American industry produced aircraft we couldn't match, in numbers we couldn't counter, supported by logistics we couldn't disrupt." The P-38 symbolized this advantage: twin engines, long range, high speed. We had nothing equivalent, nothing capable of escorting bombers to Berlin and fighting for control of the sky when they arrived. By October 1943, the P-38 had established air superiority across the Mediterranean theatre. German fighters, now outnumbered and outperformed, could contest American operations only at prohibitive cost. The lightning-fast twin-engine fighter that German intelligence had dismissed had proven to be one of the most effective aircraft of the war, not through dogfighting superiority, but through strategic capabilities that German design philosophy had never prioritized. The tactical lessons learned by Luftwaffe pilots in North Africa and Sicily would prove critical when P-38s began operations over northern Europe in late 1943. The 8th Air Force in England received its first Lightning groups, bringing the fork-tailed devil to German skies. The pilots of Jagdgeschwader 2, Jagdgeschwader 11, and Jagdgeschwader 26 would face the same opponent that had shocked their comrades in the Mediterranean, and they would learn the same hard lessons. The twin-engine configuration that seemed so improbable, so inefficient, so contrary to established fighter design principles, had delivered exactly what American commanders needed: speed to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, range to reach any target in occupied Europe, altitude performance to engage German fighters at 30,000 feet, firepower to destroy anything in its sights. The Lightning wasn't the most maneuverable fighter. It wasn't the simplest to fly. It wasn't the cheapest to produce. But it was fast enough to control engagements, and in the brutal mathematics of strategic air warfare, that capability mattered more than anything else. German aces, the finest fighter pilots in the world. Men who had shot down hundreds of Allied aircraft over 3 years of war found themselves unable to catch an enemy who simply refused to be caught. Their Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, optimized for dogfighting and low-altitude combat, couldn't compete at high altitude against an aircraft powered by twin turbosupercharged engines producing over 2,200 combined horsepower. The irony was profound. Germany's obsession with lightweight, agile, single-engine fighters, the philosophy that had produced the legendary Bf-109, had created a vulnerability that American engineers exploited brilliantly by accepting additional weight and complexity, by building an aircraft with 2 engines instead of 1, by prioritizing speed and range over turn radius. Lockheed had created a fighter that German pilots simply could not defeat through traditional tactics. The twin engines, rather than being a liability, proved decisive. They provided power to dominate at altitude. They offered redundancy that kept damaged aircraft flying. They enabled range that allowed strategic operations impossible for single-engine fighters. They symbolized American engineering philosophy, accepting complexity to achieve capability, prioritizing mission effectiveness over design elegance. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.